Searching the Wrong Way, Buddhism's Secret to Unending Happiness. We have so little time. As the Buddha said, even if you have a long life, it's 100 years, which may seem long. But as you're approaching the end, you look back and it's nothing. Time eats everything as it eats itself. We're encouraged to have unlimited mind states, unlimited goodwill, compassion, empathetic joy, equanimity, but our resources are limited. Our time, our energy, which means that we have to choose our issues very carefully. Notice that after the Buddha's awakening, the issue that he focused on was one that all of us have in common, which is that we want happiness, and yet our actions lead to suffering. And unlike some teachers who try to make us embarrassed about our desire for happiness or denounce it as selfish, he said that there's nothing wrong with the desire for happiness. It's just that we go about it the wrong way. He also said that if you can focus on this issue and clear up this issue, you take care of everything else. So we have to look at the issues we carry into the practice. Old wounds, old battles, old issues. How many of them are worth carrying or continuing to carry? How many issues can we take on and actually handle properly? We hear about people who find that they only have a few months left to live and they suddenly change their way of living. They get a sense of what's important to them and what's not, and they let the unimportant things fall aside. It's good that they do this, but it's a shame that they had to wait until the last 3 months. As the Buddha said, you should be prepared to go at any time, which means you have to really pare down your issues right now. I was reading a while back about a woman general in the army who every day at the beginning of the day would make a list of the 10 most important things that had to be done that day in order of importance. Then she would strike out the last 8 and focus on the first 2. The Buddha would have you focus on 1. What's the cause of your suffering right now? Where is your suffering? This is not a selfish issue to focus on. Because if you can't handle your own suffering, it tends to spill out onto other people. So we owe it both to ourselves and to others to focus on what we're doing that's unskillful, and have some goodwill for ourselves to see that our desire for happiness is something to be honored, something to be aspired to. But we want to make it a genuine happiness, a solid happiness, a reliable happiness, a harmless happiness. In other words, we really wish ourselves well. We get practice with the breath. The other day, we were talking about having an issue with being friends with your breath. If you can't be friends with your breath, how are you going to be friends with anybody? You have to stop and ask yourself, what's the problem? Is the breath the problem? Or is it something else inside? A lot of us come from other traditions where we're taught to think very little of ourselves, and we either accept that or react in the opposite direction. But neither of those attitudes is helpful. Simply wish yourself well. As for the question of whether you or anyone else deserves to be happy, the Buddha never talked about deserving. He was here to put an end to suffering, whether deserved or not. That's pretty radical. You know the story about Angulimala, who had killed 999 people, and then, not long after the Buddha taught him, became an arahant. A lot of people like that story. It shows that no matter what your background, there's hope. But we have to remember that at the time, there were a lot of people who didn't like what had happened and were pretty upset. Here was Angulimala, who had killed all these people, and he was literally getting away with murder. You could say that he deserved to suffer, but the Buddha didn't take that into consideration at all. He said, here's a person who's suffering really badly, and his suffering is spilling out and affecting other people. By curing Angulimala's suffering, or showing him how to cure his suffering, he saved a lot of other people too. So if there's the question of whether you deserve to be happy or not, you learn how to put that aside. Realize that that's a non-issue. The issue is that you've got actions. The mind is an active principle. This is something Ajahn Mun talked about a lot. As he said, the mind flows out. There's the source of the mind, like the source of a river. Things keep flowing out. And that's the problem. It's not that things outside are coming in to cause problems. The problem is in the way we flow out toward things. And it's not going to stop unless we learn how to do it really skillfully. Our actions are really important. There was a teaching current in the time of the Buddha to the effect that the only real things in the world are the basic elements: earth, water, wind, fire. They had a few other elements as well, but the elements were the only things that existed. Actions were non-existent. Thoughts were non-existent. This also meant that there was no basis for precepts. As they said, when a knife went through somebody's neck, it just went between the atoms, so there was nobody there to be killed. And the movement of the knife was unreal. Only permanent things were real. The Buddha's teachings are the other way around. Your actions are what are real, that have the most reality. The world out there is not the issue. The world that you experience comes from your actions. Your actions are more solid, more powerful than your experience of earth, wind, water, fire, and all the other elements. That's a pretty radical statement. This is why the Buddha keeps focusing back on what you're doing right now, because what you're doing right now is the big shaping force in your experience. And all of us, regardless of our past, regardless of what other people have told us, have the perfect right to learn how to act skillfully, to find happiness. So learn to see the issue of genuine happiness as the big issue. Learn to see the issue of genuine suffering as the big issue too. They go together, and have some goodwill for your own happiness. It's interesting that when the Buddha talks about people who are wealthy but extremely miserly and frugal, he doesn't say that it's really good that they've learned how to put aside sensual desires. He said there's something really wrong with them. If they can't learn how to appreciate some pleasures for themselves, how are they going to appreciate other people's having pleasure? They're going to be jealous. They're going to be resentful. So he does encourage sensory pleasure in moderation. He says there are pleasures that are perfectly harmless for the mind. You have to look at your own mind though, to figure out which ones are harmless for you and which ones are not, because it's not the same for everyone. And then you realize that even though harmless pleasures give some relief to the mind, they don't leave it fully satisfied. What would be a higher level of pleasure? The word sukha runs everywhere from just plain old physical pleasure, ease, well-being, all the way up to bliss. Nibbana is the ultimate sukha. The Buddha doesn't want you to be afraid of pleasure. He says to learn how to appreciate which pleasures are actually helpful for you on the path to the ultimate pleasure, and which ones get in the way. The same with pains. Some pains are helpful for you on the path. You want to learn how to use both pleasure and pain and not be overcome by either. But the purpose of all this is to create in the mind a state of genuine well-being in concentration. When you have that well-being, what misery is there to slosh out on other people? For most of us, we're miserable, and we slosh our misery out on others, thinking that we're lightening our load, but it just makes things worse. Well, you can take care of the source of this sloshing stuff inside. You benefit. The people around you benefit. When the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths, they weren't just four interesting facts about an interesting problem. He said that this is the big issue, the fact that you're causing yourself suffering, but you have the ability to learn how not to. So given the little time that we have, it's important that we focus our energy on solving the problem that's the big problem. The problem that, once it's solved, gets everything else solved. Look at your attitude toward happiness. Look at your attitude toward suffering, and see if you can bring those attitudes in line. The Dhamma that the Buddha taught is for the purpose of putting an end to suffering and for finding true happiness. These are the issues that are important. Anything that gets in the way of those issues, you can put aside. We read about those people in the time of the Buddha who came to him with this questionnaire. Is the world eternal? Is the world not eternal? Is it finite? Is it infinite? Is the soul the same thing as the body? Is it different? What happens to awakened people after death? Do they exist, not exist, both, neither? And to us, the questionnaire looks very bizarre. Yet we tend to have our own issues, and sometimes they're even stranger than that. There was the monk who said he wouldn't practice the Buddha's teachings unless the Buddha gave his answer to those questions. The Buddha said, "Well, you're going to die before you hear me answer those questions." We all know the story about the arrow. The man is shot by the arrow and he tells the doctor, "I'm not going to take the arrow out until I've found out who made the arrow, what wood it was made out of, what kind of feathers it was made with, and what was the caste of the person who shot me." The man would die before he learned the answers to those questions. We see other people's issues as ridiculous in that way. We have to learn to see a lot of our own issues as ridiculous in that way too. The issues that are getting in the way of our gaining the most from the fact that we've been exposed to the Buddha's teachings and we have the chance to practice them, at least for now. The search for happiness. Ajahn Suwat once commented on how there are people who don't like the Buddha's emphasis on suffering and stress. They complain that it's pessimistic, but, he went on to say, look at people's behavior. Everybody's looking for happiness, which shows that they're suffering. So the Buddha's providing us with something we need and are already looking for: guidance in our search for happiness. I was teaching up in Canada a couple years back and happened to mention that the Buddha saw the search for happiness as a good thing. Someone in the audience came up afterwards saying that she was surprised to hear that, and I was surprised that she was surprised. But when you look around and listen, you find a lot of people who say that the main thing that's keeping us from being happy is the fact that we're searching for happiness. If we gave up on the search, they say, happiness would come. It's like a cat. If you go chasing after a cat, the cat runs away. If you sit down, make a lap, the cat will come. But that's playing games with happiness. Maybe one of the reasons we think we should be playing games with happiness is that it sounds like it's fun. Happiness should be fun. If you search for happiness, we think, you're taking it too seriously, and that takes some of the joy out of happiness. There's part of the mind that likes the element of serendipity in happiness, that it can come without your having to do anything to earn it. But that may be because we've searched for happiness in the past and haven't been satisfied. If we feel that happiness is playing games with us, we might as well play games with it. But suppose there were a path that really led to an unending happiness. Wouldn't that change things? That's precisely what the Buddha offers. He was the sort of person who did take happiness seriously. After all, it's what we all want most in life. Instead of taking a cavalier attitude toward it, he wanted to study it, understand it, think it through, explore, to try different approaches. We admire this attitude in people who, say, are scientists or researchers, but somehow, when we apply that same approach to happiness, it seems cold. But here again, look at the reward. Happiness is what we want more than anything else. often scientists are pursuing things that are total dead ends, questions that don't solve any real problems even when arrive at the answers. But the Buddha found that the path to true happiness is not a dead end. It goes there and it delivers. So it's not that your search for happiness is getting in the way of happiness. It's simply that you're searching in the wrong way. There's a right way to do it, and it doesn't have to be a selfish endeavor. In fact, if your search for happiness is a selfish endeavor, you're not going to find it. As the Buddha said, to do it right, you have to develop wisdom and discernment, along with compassion and purity. After all, wisdom begins with the question, what when I do it will lead to my long-term welfare and happiness? There are two value judgments right there. One is that the search for happiness is a good thing. The other is that long-term is possible, and it's better than short-term. There's wisdom also in the realization it's going to depend on your actions. This is why we have to be heedful, because our actions do make a difference. And because our actions come from the mind, this is why we're here meditating. You have to meditate with a goal in mind. Here again, you get people who say that meditation is better when you have no goals. They pride themselves on the fact that they're doing it without any purpose in mind, without trying to accomplish anything. But that's an act of dishonesty. If you weren't hoping to get something out of it, why would you do it? If you think it's cool to say, hey, I'm beyond having a purpose like that, that's your purpose right there, to show that you're cool. So it's better to be honest. We're here for happiness. Then we look at our actions. Here again, there's a resistance, because we want to have happiness without thinking too much about it. But the Buddha's saying that we have to think. In fact, in thinking about the actions leading to genuine happiness, we teach ourselves the right way to think. For example, one of the actions that the Buddha says leads to happiness is generosity. He starts out by saying, give where you feel inspired, which emphasizes the freedom of generosity. But then he talks about how generosity can be practiced with relative levels of skill. Some motivations for generosity are higher than others. Some ways of giving are better than others. You give with respect. You give with a sense that something good will come of it. That's better than just tossing the gift away. If you think improving your motivation to be generous, you're more likely to get happiness out of it. The same with the precepts. If you simply obey them, that's one thing. But if you see that you're living a relatively harmless life, that yields more joy in of the practice of virtue. You see that you're principled, that people could give you rewards for breaking the precepts, but you wouldn't accept those rewards. That gives you a sense of self-esteem, a higher level of happiness. Then, of course, there's goodwill. Here again, we like to think of goodwill as a spontaneous goodness of the heart. But there are skillful and unskillful ways of developing goodwill. You want to think it through. The unskillful way is to say, I expect everybody to be happy because I wish them to be happy. That's not going to happen. I remember after 9/11, one Buddhist teacher complained that his complacent Buddhist bubble had been burst, thinking that by spreading goodwill to everybody would be happy to have happiness. Well, there's nothing Buddhist about that attitude. As the Buddha said, you develop goodwill because it's good for you. As for whether other people are going to be happy or not, that ultimately lies with them. You just want to make sure you don't get in the way. If there's anything you can do to help, you're happy to help. But as to whether they're actually going to be happy, that's going to depend on their actions. You have to think in these ways. Think through what it means to be generous. Think through what it means to be virtuous. Think through what it means to have goodwill for all beings. Then you get more happiness out of these acts of merit. You realize they yield a higher level of happiness, not just more happiness, a higher level, because it's blameless, harmless. And it teaches you skills. As you come to the breath meditation when you're practicing generosity, virtue, and goodwill, it's a lot easier to deal with the difficulties you're going to face. A greater sense of your own competence will see you through a lot of those difficulties. You've learned that if you talk to yourself in the right way about how you do your practice of generosity, virtue, and goodwill, it's going to make a difference. That teaches you to talk to yourself in a good way as you meditate, with directed thought and evaluation. Some people think that when start practicing concentration, they have to do something brand new, called directed thought and evaluation. Actually, it's what the mind's been doing all the time as it talks to itself. You direct your thoughts to a topic, and then you pass an evaluation on it. When we practice concentration, we're taking this habit of the mind, which we've been doing willy-nilly, and using it for a happier purpose. So it's good to be open and above board about the fact that, yes, you are searching for happiness, and be very clear about how the fact that you're searching is not getting in the way. The only thing getting in the way is a lack of skill in the search, and that's something that can be overcome. You do it by being more observant, more reflective. After all, this is your happiness we're talking about. If anything deserves using extra powers of observation, the search for happiness certainly does. If anything deserves reflection on your actions, as you try to figure out what you're doing wrong so that you can learn how to do it right, the search for happiness does. The more open you are about the fact that, yes, you are searching for happiness, the more skillful the search is going to be. The more skillful the search, the more rewarding the outcome.